Good afternoon and welcome to this Daily Vox Hangout with me, Fernaz Parker, and our reporter Ponso Pilani, who's going to be speaking with us today about student protests around the country. In case you've been living under a rock, this has really taken off in the past year. And as we speak, UKZN is burning. So, Ponso, what's going on?
So I think, with all the movements that have been happening, a lot of people have been questioning why is it so silent in Durban and what are UKZN students doing? And now with the alleged changes in the NSFAS policies at the university and the rise in the registration fee, students are saying enough is enough, and they're protesting, saying that they cannot afford university fees as they stand, and now they have to pay more next year, and the university is not very sympathetic towards the socioeconomic standpoint of most of their students. So a lot of the students are just protesting. It's gotten really hectic overnight with, I saw a picture on Twitter earlier, a student had an ironing board and was hiding from rubber bullets with an ironing board. But one of our reporters, Lizeka, is currently there, and we'll just chat to her and hear what she has to say.
We're going to get on the line. So this is Lizeka Maduna, who is currently at UKZN, and she knows what's going on. Hi, Lizeka, what's up?
Hello, Brenda. Thank you for having me.
Cool.
The current situation here in KZN right now.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us what you see in front of you.
All right. Yes, the current situation around here in KZN is that on campus it's quite clear the students are not really around because there are police present, and there hasn't been any action during this morning. It's only been during last night where there weren't police around. And what I've observed from the students that I've spoken to is that they are really afraid to speak out because of the way the protest is being handled by the SRC and other protesters. However, they've mentioned that they are for the protest because they need their grievances heard by the management. Others are concerned about the increment of registration fee, of which they feel is unreasonable because some of them really can't manage and afford the registration fee as we speak. So if they do increase the registration fee, that means some of them will be forced to leave campuses and they will be forced to stay at home and to not study.
So you're saying that people who are currently registered, who are fulfilling the criteria for continuing next year, will just simply not be able to pay?
Pardon?
I said that, are you saying that people will be excluded even though they've met all the criteria in terms of passing their courses and things like that, if this increase in fees goes ahead?
Yes. And also others are really complaining about the requirements of financial aid. They are saying that for them it is unreasonable for the financial requirements to be changed because they are failing as they are today because they have financial stresses.
So what happened last night? We read in the papers that the administration buildings and things were being petrol bombed. And you mentioned that students are afraid to speak out because of the police presence and things like that. Who's running the protests? Who exactly is protesting?
The protest is led by a group of students together with the SRC. And some students have said that yesterday it really got frustrating because it got physical and there was a rampage between the students and the police. That is why today they are afraid of talking because they don't know what might happen to them should the SRC court that they are talking to the media.
And has the SRC been speaking to management? Were they speaking to management about this issue prior to the outbreak of the protests?
The SRC was supposed to meet us today, but they are delaying. They were supposed to meet me at about 5 minutes ago, but I think they are delaying because they had promised to come and address me about what is going on between their engagement with the management.
Do you have any ideas of what's going to happen next?
I really don't have an idea of what's going to happen next because the SRC Secretary General was supposed to meet me a few minutes ago, but he hasn't arrived. Until then, I'm really blank of what's going to happen next. But the students here have vowed that should the management not meet their demands, the protest will continue and they are not going back to class anytime soon.
Okay, that sounds very dramatic. Thanks, Lizeka, for that update. We hope to hear more from you about what's happening at UKZN in future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Ponzo, break it down for us. What's going on?
I mean, okay, so let's talk about the fact that students don't want to speak out, right? We saw when I was covering the Potchefstroom campus, we had the same kind of a problem where students are very unhappy, but because of the threat that comes with publicly speaking out, they don't want to speak out, so they're remaining anonymous. So there are these two, like students are caught between a hard rock and a hard place, a rock and a hard place rather, because there are these issues that are prohibiting them from freely studying and freely being able to get the education that they're paying for, and also being able to address the issues that are prohibiting them from getting this education. So they're stuck in this place, and it's very frustrating. I could imagine for the students at UKZN right now who don't want the increases, but also still want to learn, but now school is being cut out until the protests end.
So this sort of speaks to the idea that there's a lack of communication, or rather that the forum is not working as it should, because the SRC, you would think that the SRC would be able to speak to management. That's what they're there for.
No, definitely, yes.
So what's going wrong?
In my own personal opinion, I think that university management does not take students' lives seriously, more especially Black students' lives, because they are the ones that suffer most from the current status quo of universities. Let's look at, let's go to Open Stellenbosch and Stellenbosch University and Open Stellenbosch, the movement behind transforming the university. I mean, if anyone has watched Leicester, they can see the evidence in their lived experiences of how it's so hard to be a Black student in that environment, right? And as a student at FIT, I remember when we were in first year, all the Black students were the ones coming into class like 30 minutes late because they're either living in Soweto, Ramfontein, or even the Val. They couldn't get raised, so they had to live at home and travel that far every morning. And then they eventually get financially excluded, or they're not getting the best of educations. I was fortunate enough that I lived at Res. So traveling to school every day was not an issue. But had I not gotten Res, that means I would have lived in Soweto with an aunt. And I would have been at a disadvantage as compared to other students in my class that happen not to be Black a lot of the time. So when the student movements do make this about race, it's because of the systematic inequalities that exist. It's not that they're just finding a scapegoat or trying to be sensational by making it about race. I mean, we all know the history of this country, and to think that...
I'm going to stop you there and say that there are people who don't know about the history of this country, who are deliberately blind. Because you get, when you hear these debates, when you hear people calling into radio, writing into newspapers, they're like, these students are burning down the university again. What's wrong with them? They just want everything for free. But that is completely ignoring the legacy that students have. So you have two students, a Black student and a white student. So maybe the white student is in Res or is living close to campus, and the Black student's living with an aunt in Soweto and then having to commute for 1 hour to 2 hours every day, and then is missing out on 4 hours of time that could be spent studying, could be spent, doing assignments, etc., taking part in campus life, student politics, etc. And that's a real issue. That's a serious thing, and it needs to be addressed. And it's not being addressed.
So I think the people that say that they do not understand why these student movements exist and the mandates that these student movements exist upon, I think it's very ignorant, and I think it's an easy way out of actually accepting what is actually happening, the reality of what is happening. So, for instance, the white Afrikaner student that I interviewed, who was blatantly telling me that she doesn't like Afrikaans English because of the British colonial history with Afrikaners, but says that Black students must get over apartheid. There's no logic there. Firstly, in terms of the two things, the two stories that she's talking about, it's the same thing, but she's blatantly ignorant of Black pain. This goes back to the fact that, to sound very American right now, Black lives don't matter. and it's expected by the society that we live in that Black people must be grateful for the little breadcrumbs that they're getting, and it's expected for Black students to be grateful that they're in these higher institutions of learning, and they're afforded the chance to even be a student in these institutions of learning.
It's that idea that, oh, you couldn't be a student here before, and now you are, be grateful.
Yes,
fit in.
But it's not enough. I think the beauty of being young is that you're not as patient as older people, and the students are fed up. Access is not enough. For me, the most blatant thing about the rise in student movements across the university campuses is the fact that it shows that having access does not mean that the systematic inequalities that are there in higher institutions of learning are gone.
I feel like that should be a hashtag. Hashtag access is not enough.
Access isn't.
That's basically what all of these student movements are about. I mean, we saw it at the beginning of the year. It started with Road Must Fall. That was the first one that kicked everything off. And I think there was this mistaken impression that it was all about the statue. The number of conversations I've had with people where people are going, oh, next we're going to pull down all the statues, and who cares? It's just a statue. It doesn't mean anything. Go back to class and all of this stuff. And it's not about the statue.
It isn't.
And it's not just about access either.
Yes.
Access is not enough.
And it's about the culture that comes with that statue. I've refrained from trying to explain to people why Roads Must Fall was not about the statue. It was about what the statue represented. The same way that people against the transformation at Stellenbosch University as well as the Potchefstroom campus keep on making it about language. Yet the students behind these movements don't make it about language. It's about culture. It's about what, for instance, what Afrikaans represents in Stellenbosch. It's about the whiteness and the white privilege behind the language, and not necessarily the spoken language itself. But people make it about the language. People make it about the statue because that's easier to do than to actually address the inequalities that exist. So people will distract you. Or try to distract the students from the larger movement. Toni Morrison talks about how these kind of things can be called distractions. You have to stop and explain yourself some more instead of being about the business of transforming. So it's very blatant in the way that the documentary Leicester was taken. It was made about language and only language. So now Open Stellenbosch had to stop what they were busy with and now explain that it's really not about language. So it's a distraction. But one thing is clear, that the Black students in South African universities are fed up. And they're tired, and they are not willing to sacrifice anymore. And for me, it's something that is very inspirational, because I've been in university for so long. I've sat in classes when I've seen these inequalities happen, but I didn't have the courage to speak out. But to see students younger than me speak out gives me also courage to be like, okay, this is not right. And because a lot of people also say, but why now?
Why now? Why this year? Why is 2015 the year where movements are springing up all over the country?
I think black young people are tired. I think that's it.
Do you see a change between when you started on campus and now as you're a postgrad student? Are things different in terms of what you're seeing from other students, how people are relating to issues that they see as being unjust or unequal? Are they speaking out more?
No, definitely. There's more, people are more vocal now. And I think it's just really the courage has built up, and people have just woken up to the idea that this rainbow nation that we supposedly live in is really is a lie. Panashe Chukwumadzi said that at her Ruth First talk, that what is surprising about movements like Road Must Fall is the fact that coconuts, the Black students who are supposed to be elite and who are closer in proximity to whiteness than, let's say, somebody in rural area, are also saying that the little that they have is not enough. It's not enough that we've been given. It goes back to that access, that people are tired of being grateful for just having us to exist in a space. They don't just want a seat at the table, they want the whole table. And they want the issues that we were promised will be redressed to be redressed. So people are more vocal now. I think students are reading more, and students are more conscious. And it's really just from being tired and wanting the generation that comes after us not to fight the battles that we're fighting now.
So speaking of fighting the battles, Roads Must Fall started at the beginning of this year. I think it was February or March or something like that. They've gone very quiet. And we predicted this. One of our reporters, Raisa Pather, she wrote an article about leadership. And if you look at the Occupy Wall Street movement, for example, where they had this very flat structure, there was no one leader. They tried to give voice to everybody's demands equally. It's the same kind of thing that Roads Must Fall wanted.
Yeah.
And the problem with that, like with the Occupy movements, is that they just fizzled, because you kind of do need a leader. You need someone to drive the whole thing. So how do we know that this is going to maintain the momentum? We've seen a proliferation of movements like that. Roads Must Fall, Transform Wits, Open Stellenbosch,
Black Students Movement.
Black Students Movement at Rhodes, the university currently known as Rhodes. And now PUC, the Northwest University's Potchefstroom campus, is about to launch its own movement.
Yeah.
But where is it going? Is there cohesive? Is there anything cohesive about these movements? I believe you spoke to the people at PUC recently about what they're trying to do. Are we going to see some sort of big joined up movement happening here? Or is it just going to be students in different universities fighting separate battles?
I think at some point we will see like a joining in of all the movements. Like last week when I interviewed the lady from, the student from Bodge, she said that they are in contact with BSM, Open Stellenbosch, and Roads Must Fall. So just because us as the media, we are not, that's the thing about the media, we cover something when it's big and we leave it alone. So I really do think that the conversations are still happening. From what I know, a lot of people that I know are involved in these different movements in different universities, that things are still happening. It might not, we've just found another story to chase. So I do think that there is a unity and support from the different sections in the different universities. And obviously there will be pitfalls. There will be a time to step back and reevaluate what our issues are and to re-strategize. But I think that we're still going to see even greater things from the different student movements. I do not think it's dying out anytime soon.
What happens when university management stonewalls? Because this is something like what we've been hearing from Rhodes, is that with the Black student movement, they just get spoken over or just ignored. They get blocked out in a sense. What do you do then?
I think it's just gonna get more violent. You know, I mean, it's so sad that it has to get violent for students' voices to be heard. But if the university and its management does not leave students with any other choice, I say let it get violent until their voices are heard. But there's this also policing of how protests must happen. You know, a lot of people are like, no, why can't they sit down with management and speak? Open Stellenbosch was criticized when the Vice Chancellor de Villiers called a meeting. They refused to go because they didn't want to be in his space. I mean, that's powerful. Space is powerful. You know, there was a reason behind them not wanting to be in his space or the space of the university to have a conversation about transformation. But there's a lot of respectability politics that is being applied to these movements as well, about how there's a certain way to protest. For example, Disrupting Whiteness at UCT is a movement that has formed. One of the organizers was speaking at the literary festival this weekend, right? And she says that when they protest at white students at UCT, they are welcomed, they are applauded, they are addressed in a better manner than when Roads Must Fall was starting and how they were treated by management of the university. That speaks to whiteness and the power that whiteness has. You know, there's this, even in Leicester, to talk about it, there's this paranoia around Black bodies gathering together that university management have, or sometimes white people have, towards Black people coming together and organizing themselves to speak about an issue. But the minute like Disrupting Whiteness was formed, people were happy about it.
So is that a predominantly white organization?
Yes, it's about disrupting whiteness within the white community, sort of. I'm not very well versed on what it's about, but I've seen a few Facebook posts, I've read a few things about them, and they are predominantly white. So
So they're applauded when they protest and they're being political.
What was that?
But when black students are, it's a problem.
Yes, there's this fear of violence or whatever. It's the same thing after there was a Leicester protest at Stellenbosch, and the next day I think some of the white students did something like "Love is in the air" or "Love is here."
Yes,
which was ridiculous because you are erasing the black students' experiences and saying that you're silencing them. So there's this constant silencing of black voices in these campuses. And it speaks to a larger issue in society where every time black people speak out about some of the inequalities they face, people seem to want to silence that. For example, last night I read a story where Matt Damon, who has some show, and was interviewing, he was in discussion with a black filmmaker, and she was talking about how the film that they were watching is not diverse. And he interjects to tell her about what diversity is.
Yeah.
I mean, what does a heterosexual white man know about diversity? He's at the top of the food chain when it comes to privilege. Yet wants to tell a black woman what privilege is. I mean, what diversity is. This goes to this whole it's silencing.
It's that idea that when a black person says, these are the disadvantages I've had, this is what I'm fighting against, and then you get, white students going, but I also have been disadvantaged, or I also had poverty, or, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And I think, I hope that these student movements not lose momentum and that they gain it. And I hope that South Africans at large support these movements and rally behind them, because this is not a fight that ends in campus. You speak to a lot of people in corporate South Africa who also face these issues on one level or the other. So it's beautiful that these movements on transformation and these talks on transformation have been spearheaded by students. It shows that the youth is not as apathetic as we've been led to believe. I mean, there were a lot of naysayers last year just before elections on how the youth is very apolitical, they're not involved in politics, yet all these movements post the national elections we've seen come up, and we're seeing youth saying that we are passionate about issues that concern politics in this country. We are concerned about our futures. We are present in these, and I think it's a good thing. It might, to a lot of people, it might seem destructive, but I think it's really, it's saying a lot about the era in which we're living in, and that what we have achieved in South Africa in the past 21 years is great, but it's not enough, and more needs to be done. And we need to come out of this commemorating and always looking back and say, okay, yes, we've achieved this, but where are we going now? And I think these student movements have forced us to actually reevaluate how far we've actually come, and if it's enough and we should just sit back, or if we still need to fight for more.
Would you draw a line between the protests that are looking to transform campuses in terms of diversity and inclusivity and the protests that have to do with financial exclusion and things like NSFAS? Or do you think that's all part of the same fight?
It's all part of the same fight, because when you look at the students that are getting financially excluded, it's still Black students.
Yeah.
So it still speaks to the issues of transformation and how Black students' lives are not being taken seriously in universities. So as much as it may look like these are two separate issues, but they're interlinked because of how the socioeconomic nature of South Africa. So Black people are still at the bottom of the financial or economic food chain. So therefore, Black students would be the ones that suffer financially more than other students of other races. So it is important that these conversations happen together. You can't have one conversation without the other. Audre Lorde says that all oppressions are linked together. You have to talk about these oppressions in unison. Also talk about how Black female students are maybe affected in universities in a way that maybe Black male students aren't. So all these issues are interlinked, and we can't talk about the other without including the other.
Is it time for an overarching organization to link all of these movements together?
Yes, I think we don't need like a new organization maybe to come up and say we're going to be tackling these issues together. But I think the the organizations that are already here need to become more intersectional, need to consider all these factors together and not just be about the politics of race. They must also be about the politics of gender, the politics of class, and put all these issues together and then take these issues forward. Because like I said, all these oppressions are linked together and we can't be speaking about one oppression without talking about the other.
So to get back to UKZN, which is what started this whole thing, and the dramatic news of people petrol bombing buildings.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that if it needs to get violent, it needs to get violent. Does it need to get that violent? Or is there another way to be loud, heard, but not burn down the campus?
I'll pose this question.
Does that alienate people?
I'll pose this question to you. What is the need? Why did the UKZN students feel that the only way to be heard was to become that violent? I think that should be the question instead of should it be that violent? But why was that their only choice? Why was being that violent the only way out? It speaks to a lot of issues about their voices, going back to their voices being silenced by the university. What is the university management doing wrong that students feel like the only way they'll be taken seriously in an institution that they're paying for is for them to petrol bomb buildings?
Okay. Yeah. Ponso, thank you so much for your time, your insight, and to our viewers, I hope you enjoyed that. Tomorrow when the headlines come out from UKZN, ask yourself, is that the only way that the students could make themselves heard? Join us again next time for a Daily Vox Hangout, and we'll be continuing to cover the story of student protests across the country. Have a good day.
Bye.